You know, I always wanted to get around to talking about this. This is a complex topic. Very, very complex. So a lot of you are going to get lost in this. Because we're doing another deep analysis. And when we do deep analysis, you know they're very deep. Now this is concerning Japanese law. Japanese law is simple but complex at the same time. Now, one of the laws in Japan that's not legal anywhere else or very few other places is their age of consent law. The legal age of consent in Japan is 13. Now, a lot of people in Japan don't ask a 13-year-old to consent with them. I want to make that clear. But technically, it's legal for a 13-year-old to give consent for relations. Now, when we talk about law, you have to understand there's always people that follow the law. And then there's people who don't abide by the law. We act as though everyone, simply because there's a law, abides by it. But they say ignorance of the law is no excuse for not abiding by the law. But hold up a minute. I'm sure many of you know of laws that you have no clue are even laws. So if you didn't abide by something, if you honestly did not know that something was a law, and you inadvertently broke the law, do you think that the way the system is set up, they should consider you a criminal? You have to be very careful with laws. Because people act as though laws are really something that we've gained consensus on. But remember, there are people who create laws for you, the rest of us. And they don't always ask for our opinion or input when they create these laws. So people try to act like we should behave a certain way, or they have disdain for certain practices. But they're really being hypocritical and phony. Nobody thinks the age of consent in America should be 13. But nobody is complaining about the age of consent being 13 legally in Japan. So what you're really saying is, I'm okay with something not occurring in my country. But if it occurs in another country, it's perfectly fine. And therein lies the problem with laws. Because people move about. They change locations geographically. and what they're used to, what they've grown accustomed to when they go somewhere else. It's just instantly not applicable. And nobody explains that to some people. You have communication barriers. You have cultural barriers. But nobody ever talks about the legal barriers. If I've grown up my whole entire life in a Japanese system, and I immigrate to a Western system, it takes time to grow accustomed to the new legal system. We lump everything in under culture because we don't want to critique and analyze legal doctrine. We have no global legalized doctrine of laws. We have accords and treaties that we claim to all agree upon. But even most of the time, those are violated. So it's no wonder you have chaos and you have judgment. That's the one thing you have, is judgment. Rampant judgment. But I'm like, what are your criteria that you're judging off of? You're judging off of a biased criteria. You're judging off of your customs, your culture, your legal parameters, not anyone else's. In order to do that and do it effectively, you'd have to agree that nobody else can immigrate. Because you only want people who are accustomed to your particular legal system. And we don't say that. Businesses definitely want the most qualified, is what they say. They don't say you have to be agreed and attuned to all the legal aspects of a country, of a state, of a municipality. They just say, we want you because you're the best at your job. You're the best doctor. You're the best lawyer. You're the best mathematician. You see how that causes a lot of confusion in a society? Laws. It's this conformity. It really is the conformity. That's the underlying gurning principle, the conformity. Because that's what laws are about. It's about conformity. But nobody talks about all the reckless, stupid laws. Or laws that are just simply outdated. The age of consent law in Japan has been around since the 18th century. Anyone want to think and venture to guess that we might have developed a little bit more insight and enlightenment since the 18th century? You wouldn't be wrong to assume that. Now, you're saying, wait a minute, you're going to get the anthropologists mad at you. For those of you who don't know, a true anthropologist is supposed to go over to another society and not make judgments premeditated on their current bias or what they're used to. That's how you really do anthropological work. But I feel like we make judgments all the time about things that we don't know. People judge the individual without knowing where the individual is from, their environment, what they're accustomed to. You say, wait a minute. There's a lot of people in Japan right now today who are married to 15 and 16-year-olds. If they came to this country, they would all have immunity, diplomatic immunity. Do you know why? Because their legal system is different than ours. So in order to mesh the two, when something conflicts, you give the other side immunity. Nobody is calling for generalized laws. But they always want to call for generalized behavior. I find that odd, don't you think? You don't say we need to generalize and have one type of legal system on the planet. You don't say that. Every nation is fine with having their own national laws. Hell, in the United States, all 50 states have different state laws. From city to city, cities have different city laws. So everybody is fine with their laws. Nobody wants consensus and consolidation. But then folks want to complain when your laws don't mesh together. What kind of nonsensical bullshit is that? Absolutely crazy. Absolutely. In Japan, you can also marry your first cousin. It's common. It's common that a lot of marriages are between first cousins in Japan. Here, that would be frowned upon because it's not customary. It's not the norm. And here's a big one. Defamation. Now, Japan has a very interesting perspective on defamation. Japan, anybody can sue for defamation. This is when you say something negative about someone, defaming their character, and it's not true. You can sue in this country, and sometimes you might win. You have to go to discovery. Now, there's a legal matter going on between a far-right fringe conservative by the name of Candace Owens and a conservative who ran for a congressional seat in Baltimore by the name of Kim Klacik. Kim Klacik is suing Candace Owens for defamation of character. She went online and called this woman a prostitute. All kinds of negative things for 44 minutes. Now in Japan, Kim Klacik would have already won that case. Let me tell you why. Japan has a defamation law system that says even if the claim that the person is making against you happens to be true, the defamation case still withstands because you did damage and harm to the honor of that person's character. So even if a defamation lawsuit is found to be true, even if Candace Owens is found to be true, that Kim Klacik was a prostitute and got the $8 million as prostitution money, she would still win because it defamed her character, regardless of whether it's true or not. Do you understand if you come to America and somebody defames you, more than likely, you don't end up winning anything because Americans defame other Americans every day of the week, probably every 2 seconds. I mean, you would have QAnon. I'd have a huge class action lawsuit against QAnon right now. Oh, everybody's a pedophile with them. No proof, no justification. Ketanji Brown Jackson would have a case in Japan of defamation. Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins would all have cases of defamation against Marjorie Taylor Greene in Japan. She said they're pro-pedophile because they supported Ketanji Brown Jackson for Supreme Court. That's defamation. In Japan, they would win that case. So what that does in Japan is simple. You can't just run up on the street and criticize anyone. You have to respect everyone, regardless of whether you agree with them. You have to show people respect. It stops a lot of stupid shit from happening. Maybe if our defamation laws were similar, we'd have a lot less people misbehaving on the internet. Now in Japan, this was actually tried. There was a newspaper reporter who reported on a businessman in Japan who was having an extramarital affair. The allegation turned out to be true, but the individual who was having an affair still won a large settlement because the Japanese court system said, you still defamed his character by reporting on the news of the affair. It would instantaneously put a lot of these tabloids out of business. All of these Russian troll bots, you could sue the source. You could sue Ron Watkins, who we think is the founder of QAnon, for declaring everyone that the white evangelical community dislikes pedophiles. Oh yes, you could sue them, and you could win a lot of money in Japan. I'm just saying. I bring this up because I don't think we focus enough on laws. We just act like a law is a thing, and it should never be questioned. It's the law, don't you know? And I'm like, well, wait a minute. The law was written by an individual, right? So it's really a bunch of individuals who write laws. It's not like all of us get together and do consensus building around laws. Do you know how much better that would be if the people who lived in a certain area wrote their own laws? Now you'd have chaos in certain areas, but again, you'd have to get a consensus. That's where states' rights comes from. The conservatives talk about. We've seen that happen too, where certain people in states want to have segregation, want to have lynching. So even that wouldn't work out in America. Maybe it would work out in another place where people are less sick, less racist, less bigoted, less judgmental. But it certainly wouldn't work out here. Even in places where they have defamation laws, you still have rules that are restricted. Now, there's a really complex question that I was asked concerning. And I said I don't have a generalized answer for the complexity of the nature of the question. Some people get upset with this. I don't know why. Everything is not black and white. the vast majority of times, it's gray. It's so gray you can't even see the gray. I'll give you an example. There's a rule in Japanese high schools that says that girls in the high schools cannot wear ponytails. They say that it excites the boys and the men sexually when they just see a girl wearing a ponytail. Now, here's where it gets complex. Apparently, there's science that says that a certain part of the male brain is excited by seeing the nap of what they perceive to be a female individual wearing a ponytail. There is some research, psychology research, stating this. But a lot of that hasn't been peer reviewed. A lot of it was done at a long time ago. It doesn't take into account social and cultural changes. When you ask the young people on the street, what do you think about these school laws, rules about ponytails? A lot of them are like, it's about conformity. It's about forcing someone to not be authentically who they are. And I was like, that's spot on. That's exactly what it's about. It's about control and conformity. But ultimately, people want to do what they want to do. Everyone has a right to experience their experience here the way they choose to. Everyone. But usually, it's heterosexual men who try to force conformity and submission because of their issues. It's outside of anyone else's control whether somebody should wear a ponytail or not, besides the individual who wants to wear the ponytail. But you get individuals who want to make rules to govern over people's autonomy, their sovereignty. And these things never really get debated. So people get a grind to it. They just say it's conformity and you have to do it. If you don't do it, you get punished. You get scolded. You get ostracized and shamed. The same is true with the hair. In Japan, if you had brown hair, you had to dye it black. Black hair was seen as better than brown hair. There are students who went through these ordeals, who suffer from the trauma of not being able to be who they are, simply because of rules and laws. And I ask you, does that make sense? Shouldn't people be able to do what they want to do if it causes no harm to another individual? Now you say, well, there's science that says that men are sexually attracted to minors with ponytails. That's on them. That's their experience. If they can't do the job, then find someone who will. You can't minimize someone else's full experience because you have an issue with your experience. We say, thou shalt not kill. It's against the law to murder. At its core, that's minimizing someone else's experience, impacting harmfully someone else's experience because of yourself. So we pass laws to minimize harmful experiences. But we also pass laws to harm people, trying to exhibit their own identity and experience. It cuts both ways. Everybody just says the law. The law is this, and you have to follow the law. And if you don't follow the law, you're a lawbreaker. They really make it out to be that you're a bad person if you don't follow some other individual's deranged thinking that happened to become a law. They act like none of us can be lawmakers. I mean, you can run for an office yourself and be part of the process of creating laws. And because some individuals at a particular group of individuals at a particular time craft a particular law, they try to act like you're bad if you don't follow. That you're a horrible person if you want to wear a ponytail to school. It's complex. It's very complex. There is science and data that states what they're saying is true. But it's also minimizing another individual's identity and experience. This is not a simple and easy debate. People want debates to be simple and easy and done in 15 seconds, like their microwave meal. You can't do lawmaking and critiquing in 15 seconds. It requires deep and critical analysis and thought. And I don't think most people can think that deeply anymore. The youth want change. They say all of these restrictions were done at a particular time when we didn't have a lot of information. Now we have more information. We're a more open and tolerant society. So why are these mundane, arcane, and ancient laws still on the books? Elderly people will say, well, it's because wise old men wrote them. And we shouldn't go against the wise old men in our society. And the youth are like, wait a minute. Who says we're going against? We're saying that they might have been applicable at that particular time. But times change. And laws should too. You know, if a law is not really applicable to the people that it's trying to manage, it should automatically be abolished after a year. If they create a law that no one likes, it's not applicable to the community where you reside. After a year, it should go away. They should make time-sensitive laws. We're testing this out. If it doesn't work in 3 years, it's no longer a law. We scrub it off the books. That would be a much better way, a quantitative quantitatively analyzing whether something works effectively or not. But they make laws that last forever. So if they don't work for you, well, tough luck. You have to live with them forever. It was the 18th century. You know what's happened since the 18th century. One of the reasons the law might have been applicable in the 18th century is that people didn't live much longer than 13 years of age. So if you wanted to have intercourse, you probably had to have it before your 13th birthday, or else you would die. We sort of kind of have expanded life expectancy. Do you think they might want to take that into account? I'm just saying. We've sort of kind of improved medicines. Do you think some of these medical health laws might want to take that into account? I think we have to have a critical and crucial conversation. I'm not saying we have to jump to irrational conclusions and do anything. I'm saying we have to be thoughtful and think about it. Meshing laws together hasn't really worked in our society. It really hasn't. It's created all the problems that people complain about. They complain about a problem, but never offer a solution. Do you know the age of consent in Europe is mostly 16? Now in Europe, most of Europe, they can speak English. They have some level of proficiency in English, except for the French. They refuse to speak English. Have you ever been around the French? If there's more than one French person, you'll know. They'll start speaking French around each other. You're sitting right there. You know they both can communicate in English. And yet they'll speak French. We love the French. I love the French. Vive la France. So when you come over to the United States, and the age of consent is 2 years above 16, everybody that, is in relations with individuals who are 16 in Europe, magically when you cross the pond, you're a pedophile. According to the law, the age of consent in America is 18. The age of consent in England is 16. You're a pedophile because of the law. Then nobody has thought to change this loophole. Oh, they'll complain about pedophilia, we're doing all that. It's bullshit. It's complete and utter bullshit. I told you, it's always been laws. Let's go to Turtle Island and wrap it up here. You had a lot of different tribes on this land in the Americas. So many different tribes. I forget the count, but it was a lot. It would be tribes inside of tribes. It really gets crazy. The biggest issue with how the indigenous, the aboriginals, lost this land, the Americas, it had nothing to do with colonialization. Yes, that played a role. People shooting you plays a role. But there were owls. Listen to what I'm saying, because they don't tell you this. There were wise owls who came to the indigenous and the aboriginals and told them, the real problem in your society are these laws, these tribal laws. Every different tribe has a set of tribal laws. And you need to be on one accord. You can do your own separate things, but you need to be on one accord. And they refuse. And a house divided will not stand. You see this happening now, where they're passing all of these anti-trans bill legislation, anti-critical race theory legislation, anti-abortion legislation. Now you say, wait a minute. Has this happened before? Absolutely. That's why we had the first Civil War, because of laws. You see, the law was different in New York than it was in Mississippi. If you went to New York and you were black, you were free because it was a free state. So if you traveled on an errand that your slave owner sent you to New York for, you were technically free. And you could claim freedom. Now, the slave owner doesn't necessarily like losing what he considered his property. So he would say, no, you're not free. The law in Mississippi says I own you. And that's how the dispute started. Over laws. Much like tribal disputes over tribal laws. You really have to focus in on laws. It's the day after Easter, right? So it's not too soon. Everybody says Christ, 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 but nobody talks about Christ in the law. Remember, Christ was no fan of the law. You can lie all you want. We know. There were owls present. You've got to function and focus on laws. They're essential. Now some people say if you have no laws, you have anarchy. You have to question those individuals. Because by default, they really are saying they want to be controlled. And without some centralized control mechanism over them, they'll misbehave. Those are the individuals that are more inclined to misbehave already. It's not like people don't murder because it's against the law. It's not like people don't steal because it's technically against the law. It's not like people don't pillage and plunder and rape because it's against the law. So the laws to a lawbreaker are nothing. The only people that obey and follow the laws are law-abiding citizens. And they complain constantly about new laws when the old laws are not reviewed, on top of passing new ones. Nobody in the society was clamoring for book bans. Nobody in the society was clamoring for not being allowed to say gay in a classroom. Yet here we are, new laws that nobody really was clamoring for. It seems like nowadays certain people in the conservative movement are creating, crafting, and passing laws out of boredom and bigotry. That's what it appears. And this is not new either. That happened in tribes as well. You had indigenous tribes we did not fuck with because they were on some fuck shit. You gotta focus on all of these dumb laws. Make some of the old ones time sensitive. Meaning if they're not working anymore, in the next 10 years we sunset them. They go away. No matter whether they were in the 18th century, the 19th century, or the current century. If they're not working, they get taken off the book. Imagine that. You know, for every law that's passed, a sovereign right is taken away. Some people cheer that on and then say that they're for freedom. I say freedom for who? You know, if somebody is gay and they can't identify that way in the classroom, you've taken their freedom away. So it's not freedom for everyone. It's freedom for you. With a lot of people, freedom is a one-way street. It's not two ways. They only see something merely based off of their perspective and bias. They cannot see the other perspective. They vilify the other perspective. It's evil. If you ever say something is complex, you're evil. They say they're against censorship, yet they're censoring a theory. For a party that likes different conspiracy theories, how would you like us to censor some of those dumb conspiracy theories? You know, like QAnon. We can go to the evangelical churches and say, from now on, if you talk about politics in the pew, if you talk about Donald Trump, we're taking away your tax exempt status. How would you like that? It's censorship. So maybe what schools should do is maybe they should get a 501(c) tax exempt status. That way they can say gay and read different books. You don't know what it's going to have to come to because of dumb laws crafted and created by dumb people. I say you time sensitive and time set all of these laws, no matter how good or bad they might appear to be. A law at its fundamental core is an experiment. Every law, individual, no matter how big or small, is an experiment. And you're testing it out to see if people in the community will like the law. They never come back to you and ask you for feedback. Hey, we just passed all these brand new laws. Can you fill out this survey and return it to the government office? Put a check mark by the laws you enjoy. Put an X by the laws you don't enjoy. They never ask you, as a citizen, who they're passing laws about, for your feedback concerning the laws. What, is there an automatic assumption that we love every law that's passed? Where would that assumption come from? You know, the president kind of has this check and balance. A president can't be a king. A president can sign executive orders. But those executive orders are only so good for as long as that's the president. A new president can come in and repeal every executive order that the previous president did. And most of the time, when parties switch, they do exactly that. It's not unusual. So why can't you have that same functionality for some of these state, municipal, and city and government laws where if we don't like them, we get a chance to weigh in and give feedback? People will clamor for new laws to ban things, but there won't be any clamor for reviewing and removing things. It's like we always want to add new laws, new rules, new regulations, but we don't want to review and remove shit that doesn't work, shit that's old and stale. And see, this is why I love Gen Z. The kids get it. They're literally transitioning their mind away from old, rigid thinking. It's beautiful to watch. They're saying, wait a minute. None of us think that at 13 we're capable of giving consent or know that what we're entering into by having relations with an adult. They're saying, why can't we wear ponytails and have our identity and be who we are? They're challenging old, mundane, arcane, and ancient thinking. And people are telling the children, shut up and sit down. We know more than you. We've lived longer than you. Just because you've lived longer than someone, you got to get out of that mindset. You had an experience, but you're living in 2022. You're not still living in 1972. People are like, in 1972 we did it. It's 2022. If I was in 1972, I would behave like they did in 1972. I'm in 2022. We have to behave like we're all 2022. People want to live in a year that no longer exists. So ask yourself, are the laws in 2022 that were created in the 18th century still applicable to you? This is complex. It's complex because there's change and disruption. And anytime there's change and disruption, people are going to be mad and upset. And they're going to point fingers and blame whole hosts of people they think are responsible. But ultimately, there's no one single individual responsible. It's collective change that occurs. We all used to ride on horses and buggies. Do you see any horses and buggies on the freeway? Or does everyone have an automobile? We all used to get our milk delivered by the milkman. Now we go to the grocery store and pick up our milk. Our soy milk. Our oat milk. You mean you can get milk from oats? Change is not always pleasant. It often is very messy. Reviewing laws and seeing if they're applicable is something as a society we seldom do. You see, they're still using civil rights laws to prosecute hate crimes. They're still using laws that were written in the Jim Crow era, after slavery, in fact, to prosecute crimes written today. Ask yourself, does that make sense? Or shouldn't we just update certain laws that are critical and get rid of other laws that aren't critical? I thought I would talk about Japanese laws to make a larger point. A point that you seldom hear.